Each year, over 50,000 young people are suspended in the state of Maryland. That's 8 out of every 100 students. Of those students, 41% are suspended for behaviors such as being disrespectful, falling asleep in class, and not wearing their school uniform. Maryland educators lead the country in so many different categories. I'm sure we can find better ways to manage student misbehavior. Recently, the Maryland State Board of Education adopted changes to the Maryland School Disciplinary Regulations and adopted a new state code of discipline. The goal of the regulations and policies is to find better ways to manage student misbehavior and to reduce the number of suspensions in the state.
My name is Robert Murphy. I work at the Maryland State Department of Education. It's important to reduce suspensions because we want all kids to be successful. What happens with suspension is essentially you get told, we don't want you here. And if that continues to happen over and over again, then eventually you say, okay, you don't want me here, I don't want to be here. Unfortunately, when we look at our data, we have some very serious issues with disproportionality. The African American students are the most suspended group. I was actually with the school system probably about a month ago, and I showed data that said that for every one white student, they were suspending 12 black students.
Suspension impacts African American students more than other groups. African American students are only 35% of Maryland public school enrollment, yet they make up 61% of all suspensions. In fact, for every white student that is suspended, almost 3 African American students is suspended. And young people with disabilities are also punished differently. Students with disabilities make up 12% of the student body, but account for 23% of all suspensions. Some educators believe that suspending is a way to change behavior. The data doesn't indicate that that's necessarily true. Both the short and long-term data shows that suspensions do more harm than good to students. Just getting suspended once cuts the chances of graduation in half. 2 suspensions cuts a child's chances of graduation by 2/3. When an educator chooses to suspend a student, he or she is making a decision that may change the life course and success of that particular child. We use terms like offenders, offenses, sanctions, consequences, penalties. Those are all criminal justice words. The issue of student discipline isn't about dangerous or violent kids. We're talking about 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 17-year-olds who didn't wear their uniform, who might got smart. Those are not offenses. That's misbehavior. That's an incident. That's not an offense. You work hard for people that you think care about you and that are invested in you. The real issue for us is really trying to get students to feel a part of their school and to get the adults actually to understand that school is, yes, an academic piece, but there's also a social and emotional piece that I think we have to begin to really work on. We want educators in Maryland to see out-of-school suspension as their absolute last resort and not a first resort. So if suspensions don't fix the problems with student behavior, what does? Many schools in Maryland have had success with programs that build and maintain healthy relationships between students and staff. By doing this, schools can prevent behavior issues before they start and resolve behavior issues when they occur. We visited City Springs Elementary Middle School in downtown Baltimore City to see how they are working to reduce suspensions.
My name is Rhonda Riquetta, and I'm the principal at City Springs Elementary Middle School. When I first became the principal at City Springs, there was a problem with the climate in the school. There was a lot of fighting. Students and teachers didn't come to school feeling happy.
When I first came here, my school was a place of violence and fighting.
My name is Aronde. I'm an 8th grader at City Springs. I was acting up. I didn't know how to stay in my class.
The percentage of students who were scoring proficient or advanced on the MSA, for example, at some grades was in the single digits. The culture in our school needed to change, and so that next school year we implemented training in restorative practices for the entire staff.
Restorative practices are based on the idea that young people perform best when educators work with them to resolve behavioral issues rather than simply giving them punishments like suspension.
In restorative practices, we do what we call circles. So we would sit in a circle with the student and whoever is affected by the situation, and we would talk about what happened. We would ask, why is it happening, and what do they think needs to happen to make the situation right.
Circles help you have better relationships because you can talk out your problems and they help y'all make up.
I think that I'm better behaved. The circles help me resolve my problems, and I think I matured more.
After we had a full year of implementation, our suspensions dropped from 86 to 10. It made me feel very proud, and I knew that it was the result of people working very, very hard. Suspending kids makes the work easy. If you just get rid of the problem and you don't have to deal with it. But we weren't doing that anymore. We were actually facing the problems and trying to come up with real solutions. And the goal should be to change the behavior. It shouldn't just be about a punishment.
At City Springs, restorative practices and relationship building are helping to create a healthy, productive school climate. But what happens when a child needs a stronger response to poor conduct? We visited the George Washington Center for the Arts and Technology in Arts Magnet High School to see how they are using mediation to keep students in school even when they have behaved in a way that would usually result in a suspension.
My name is Karen Steele. I'm the principal of George Washington Carver Center for Arts and Technology in Towson, Maryland. I believe that education has the power to change the world, and I believe that that can only happen one individual student at a time. I think the most difficult part about working in schools is remembering that it's just made up of people. It's easy in education to focus on the rules, the procedures, the curriculum, the testing, and to lose sight of why you're doing it and who you're doing it with.
I got suspended because I told my teacher to shut up. We was having a conflict in class, and I could feel as though she was trying to do her job and maybe push me to be a better student, but I just couldn't understand that. I was angry at the school, where I still wanted to come to school and just learn.
To be told you can't come can be heartbreaking, because in some cases, that school day is their only stable place. I think it chips away at their sense of hope. In the academic year of 2007 to 2008, we peaked at an 8.5% suspension rate. We're also a school where the students make a choice each and every day to travel sometimes halfway around the county to be here to do something that they love. If we had any suspension rate, then there was some need not being filled. We began looking at adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences can range from a divorce in the family, a death in the family. It can also be a parent who is incarcerated. It's not unusual for people to have one or two, but it's when you get to 4 or more that it impacts chronic health as well as well-being.
The data on adverse childhood experience is stunning. Having 4 or more adverse childhood experiences more than doubles a child's risk for chronic suspension.
And we discovered that, in fact, those students who had experienced a suspension during that prior year were those students who had those multiple adverse childhood experiences. When a student has an incident, when a student is expressing anger about something, it's really not about us. And so we came from that perspective, and that's when we created our Refocus Room. That was a tremendous moment. We dropped our suspension rate to 3%. Last year, it was 1.5. And the feedback from the students has been they feel like they're being listened to even more now.
I can say it is definitely more effective than being suspended. It teaches you discipline because you're learning from your mistake, but at the same time, you're still receiving the education that you need.
When a child goes to a focus room, not only do they have the work collected from all their teachers that they can work on that day, but they have to see me, they have to see an assistant principal, and they have to go through a 4-page checklist about their behavior. Even though it's an all-day process, we keep those kids here. We make them believe that they're worth it. We'll take the harder route and make them sit here with us for as many days as it takes.
It was an incident where me and this girl, we were kind of butting heads. I said my part and she listened, and then she said her part and I listened. It's like kind of a good feeling that they were listening to what was said. After the mediation, school was a lot better.
It behooves every educator in the state to be willing to look below the surface. If we can dig deep and we can find that meaningful, personal connection for each person, then change can start to happen in our schools.
As we have seen, mediation and in-school counseling have proven successful for improving school climate at the Carver Center. But what are educators to do with more serious behaviors like fighting? We visited the Anchor Points Academy in Centerville, Maryland, to hear how alternative education centers can provide intensive mentoring services to help young people in need.
I'm Carrie Mitten. I work as the program director at Anchor Points Academy in Centerville, Maryland. Anchor Points Academy is a program for students that are falling behind, or students who are not attending school, or students that have behavior issues.
I got into a fight at school. I was angry and frustrated that this kid was bullying me. I flipped out, and then I got suspended the next day. Being suspended, I didn't learn anything, actually. I just sat around.
Suspensions don't work because kids are home. They're not getting their work done. The grades are going to go down. They're going to start slipping, and then they're going to start giving up. If they start giving up, then you're starting to look at dropping out. I actually have created a program that's called Alternative to Suspension. For students that are suspended 4 to 10 days, they have the option to have their students sent here. So that way, instead of being suspended on the street, at home, playing Xbox, not doing work, they get work sent from their home school to Anchor Points, and then that work is completed and sent back to the home school. To date, we have saved 80 days of suspension. I tell the students from day one, I tell the parents from day one, you have just adopted Aunt Carrie to your family, because I will treat them like they're my own kid. It's very disheartening when I hear teachers or administrators talking about the students at Anchor Points, that they're, problem kids, that they're kids that, oh, they don't count. Yes, they do.
Like at the high school, they automatically jump to yelling at the kid and trying to get rid of the kid, basically. But here, they try to address the kid's problems and try to figure out what's bothering this child, what's making them act this way.
Students need to know that teachers care about them before you even think of suspension. Why is the kid acting that way? Is the child frustrated? Is the child hungry? Is there a need that's not being met? Look where we are. We're in Portables. We don't have a lot of money, but we build relationships. That's what makes us successful. To watch the shell open and the kids start to be successful and making the honor roll and getting a 4.0, it's just incredible. Their shoulders start to get wider and they start to smile more, and it's just absolutely incredible. And I love, love, love my job.
We've seen 3 different examples, urban, suburban, and rural, that are all succeeding in reducing suspensions. Their approaches may differ in practice, but all are based on the idea that strong relationships, mediation, and counseling are effective ways of building healthy school climate and of holding young people accountable for their actions. We encourage all educators in Maryland to work together to make schools places of hope, learning, friendships, and respect.